Where we last left off on the previous video, I had just wrapped up what was supposed to be a fun Colossalcon trip followed by some unwinding with friends afterwards. I met up with my friend Bob, but the second group of friends had basically bailed on Cedar Point. My bright ideas led us to the most anxiety-driven moments that I'll never forget. The driver door opened and out stood the most intimidating, towering embodiment of authority that commanded utter subjugation. Are you guys familiar with Lil Wayne? Because this officer was Miss Officer, blazing red hair, athletic figure, and the most reassuring demeanor that instantly swayed my concerns. Even if I were to be arrested, I'd get a chance to get her name on the police report as consolation. I'm obviously making light of the situation, but it's like, if you were about to be sentenced to an inescapable punishment you knew you were guilty of, why not be led to the police station by the most alluring person possible? The officer requested our identifications, and she ran the scan to see if we were people of interest in the known searches. Naturally, I have friends that are good influences on me, so Bob was in the clear, and I was nary a rule breaker myself. So with her calming voice like that of the sweetest songbird, we were assisted to the back seat of the patrol car. More conflicted than any relative experience opposite with any other, I was torn between trying not to escalate the situation to avoid fines or reprimands, yet due to my dang attraction to cute redhead girls, I wanted to revel in this moment, down to the single most details of her get your mind out of the gutter. Of course I went to the former option. I dare not overstep my good graces with her.
My head just slumped down and I just felt so bad. I'm like, Bob, I'm sorry. And I didn't want to say anything, I didn't want to make any quick movements.
Not so much as trying to see her kind eyes in the rearview mirror, up until she drove the two of us to the entry of the Cedar Point amusement park. Can you imagine my relief when she opened the door for us, said, adhere to the gravity of the posted signage, and to find proper transportation upon returning back from the park? I couldn't help but feel kind of rebellious for the fact that my first impression in arriving at an Ohio attraction via cop car, I thanked her kind, merciful soul as she rolled out of our lives. I wish I could say the rest of the trip went smoothly. Day one turned out to be Guy's Day, since the second group of friends have not come through, with intention to see them the next day, opting for the 2-day admission to save money. There's a thing about roller coasters. I tried to be sneaky, only taking out my action camera out of my cargo shorts once passing the entrance. Nope. Once again, I pushed my luck. I saw the ride operator sprint back to the podium at the corner of my eyes as the ride gained speed. The ride reversed back to the descent, and that guilty feeling of the lump in my throat grew as the ride operator took my camera. I felt so bad after being scolded and lectured at what potential dangers my actions might have caused. Shaking it off was a little bit easier as the following ride lines were really short, most not taking more than 30 minutes, if super popular. Some we even ran through the snaking entry for it being so empty.
Cheating! Busted!
I don't recommend trying to be adventurous and dining at the park. Take it from me, servers and chefs don't get paid more for being at the park, so quality was not something to tell a friend about. Some animals were housed in a branch of the park where you could pet some. A thing about me is I'm repulsed by bad odors.
This camel, I can see how it does look like cigarettes. Those are his teeth. They're just really bad. It's not cigarette butts.
So I was fine with a fast stroll through and admiring from afar. Still, I made sure to wash my hands and felt a little clean swagger to renew me. More up my alley was the exhibit of dinosaurs. Most were even up to scale with information and buttons to interact with.
Jojo reference.
Some even had simulated sounds and articulation. Needless to say, I felt like a little kid again. The sun began to sit low on the horizon. It was honestly a pretty scenic view. An odd observation was that there was a clear delineation of bugs that flew around but didn't go past a certain perimeter of the park. I don't know what kind of gypsy magic this was, but I wanted some to take with me, like the best kind of Pokemon Max Repel. Yes, please. We proceeded to request information about taxis at the information desk near the exit of Cedar Point. We hailed a traditional taxi back to the mainland, where the hotel and Bob's car was parked. It was really nice to unwind back at the hotel and not spend money on expensive basic needs again. Luckily, next door to the hotel was this pretty novelty restaurant that had surprisingly good food. My liver was in a bit of need of rest, as cons tend to put it through the ringer. I was torn yet again on getting this novelty alcoholic drink served in a toy saxophone. Thinking like a true cosplayer, this would be perfect for my sexy sex man saxograms cosplay for DragonCon. I contacted the second friend group with my mood low and expectations even lower. But I wanted to be sure, even though knowing the answer before they could even get back to me. So I decided to just make it back to the airport upon checking out of the hotel. I set out to hail an Uber, but it failed to have any drivers working in the Sandusky area. There were no public transportation and no taxis, even in my deep research of the area. According to the map, it was less than an hour walk back to the Kalahari, which logically was a more populated venue, and so I set out, luggage in tow. The weather was mild, so I was optimistic for all of 8 minutes, marking where the sidewalk ended. I alternated between double checking if there was any ride shares popping up and using the walking GPS tracker aimed for the Kalahari resort. Turns out the Ohio roadways speckled between some residential and commercial locales connected by a really foreign system with no sidewalks to give safe travel for pedestrians like me with rolling luggage. I felt that dang old tension rise as cars began to rush by me that felt closer and closer, indicated by the gusts of wind. I pulled off the shoulder, trying to reach out to my local friends, desperate for a way out of this situation. To give you guys context, I come from Vegas, a fairly popular town that had lots of options for travel as well as sidewalks I assumed was a fairly standard thing that modern cities had. Clearly I was wrong in my assumptions. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to mentally prepare myself for worst case scenarios in order to react for those fight or flight cases. Projecting ahead, I could see a distracted driver potentially drifting off the shoulder to take me out. I used all of my energy to listen for approaching cars from behind me. Cars kept passing, which I tried to keep pattern with by scooting away from the road as fast as I could. A car that I had recognized passing once before drove back in the opposite direction. It passed by once more as if a lying car in the outer limits of townships, stalking its vulnerable prey, also known as my desperate self, clinging on to what little bit of hope I had. The car reversed its direction to pull up next to me, which naturally triggered all kinds of warning signs in my head. My senses intensified, processing so much information to ensure my survival as the scenario screamed, "Human trafficking!" in every way. It's not kind to judge a book by its cover, but my survival skills pay no mind to being kind when it comes to my safety. His hair was thin, if not balding, his glasses were heavily dated, nondescript clothing, but the car gave me the worst warning signs. Bare metal door frames on the inside, faded paint. The kicker here was a steering wheel that was partially cut away. Anyone who's watched a cop movie has seen the trope of handcuffing a person to the steering wheel, right? So in my head, I was thinking, who is this guy? Who did he handcuff to the steering wheel, then cut themselves free? Could this possibly be a stolen car? I tried to walk forward in a purposeful manner, but he persisted in talking to me. He claimed that he couldn't drive by with a clear conscience, and then asked where I was going and if I had any weapons on me, which I couldn't in plans to board a plane. Then I quickly squared up the cost-benefit analysis along with my past scenarios in movies and how they played out. He said I was headed in the wrong direction for the Kalahari, which was a bit confusing, but I felt on my last leg of options when he offered to drive me there. He opened the trunk so I could put my luggage in, at which point I tried to remember as many license plate sequences as I could, just in case. He was approaching the passenger door, but I insisted on taking the back seat, with logic of being able to get leverage to move if he took his hands out of my line of sight on the steering wheel. Several minutes of silence pass until he talks about his reasoning for stopping to offer help. Turns out he had been in a similar run with his friends, not being there for him, and he resorted to going with a wrong crowd, partaking in drugs until he found the grace of religion to turn over a new leaf. He felt the kindness that he was given needed to be passed on. As we rounded the Walmart down the street to finally at the resort, can I just say that I'm glad for kind-hearted, sympathetic people out in the world? My gosh, I was so grateful to be back. Just as I had predicted, back in range of the Kalahari, I was able to hail a rideshare thanks to the heavier traffic around the resort. It wasn't until late at night that my friends responded and I told them I was safe. Not feeling up to it to share what happened in detail, utterly physically and mentally exhausted from the whole ordeal, I kept it brief. Then spent the better part of the night and following midday until my flight back home from the Cleveland airport. In conclusion, I learned crucial lessons I hope to impart to you all. Never expect to meet up with any friends during an event. Plans are all tentative and pending void regarding a public coordinated meeting. Research taxi and public transportation. The causeway apparently doesn't allow pedestrians or bikers. This is a new format of video that I'm experimenting with, and I feel hyped to share with you guys. My goal in producing these stories are to make people not feel so lonely if you're going through a similar situation as I had in my life. Share some close call moments you had on any of my socials and get a conversation started. Subscribe and follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm the Bane's Hero. Explore your full potential and be the hero of your own story.